So today I'm very pleased to be visiting with Dr. Vishal Mangalwadi. Good to have you here. Thank you
I'm
for making the
honored.
trek.
Thank you.
So what I thought we should do is talk about a topic that goes under different names all over the world, but it's a hot topic all over the world. Um, we have the problem of globalism, the problem of nationalism, the challenges of nationalism, nation states, insurrection movements, competing religious um, uh, claims. I really enjoyed and greatly benefited by your book, How the Bible Shaped Our Modern World, How the Bible made our modern world. You are just finishing up a project, or you've got a book um, making similar claims about in modern India.
How
Is
the
that
Bible created modern India.
okay? Is that is let's start there, but we're going to zoom out and zoom in.
Mhm.
But let's start there. Is that formulation, how the Bible formed modern India, offensive to anyone?
I suppose so. When I discussed this with Jordan Peterson 2, 3 years ago, some Hindu intellectuals were very upset, but they didn't attack me, they attacked him.
Okay, that works out. Uh, so they attacked him for giving you a
Yes,
platform,
yes,
right? Um, because they want Hinduism to be the genius of nationalism.
yes,
So
yes,
they are Hindu nationalists as opposed to Indian nationalists.
yes. And they want to get rid of the name India,
Okay,
and they want to change the constitution of India because they realized that the name India came from the Bible. In the book of Esther, India is mentioned as the farthest province of Persia, and the concept of nation was never there in India. So it's only Indian National Congress was established in 1885 uh, by an Englishman. By 1874, first organization had been established, which was called India National Association. So the idea of India and nation came only after 1874 in the Indian mind. The
okay,
British East India Company existed, and the Dutch East India Company existed, but by India, they didn't mean what we mean by India today.
okay. And what did they mean?
Indonesia,
Oh,
which
okay,
is Indian Asia. So both the companies wanted to trade with Indonesia. Of course, at that time,
sure.
Indonesia was not a nation. The nation of Indonesia is a really product of Abraham Kuyper's vision
Hmm.
because it was Dutch colony.
Right.
And his vision was realized as Indonesia as a nation.
Now, when India first began taking shape on the subcontinent, at that time, Pakistan was part of it, or was it
Yes,
not?
yes. Yes. So it was William Carey, the Baptist missionary,
Hmm.
who launched a newspaper called Friend of India.
Okay.
So the concept of India took off from there. And then the Indian Civil Services, ICS, that was established virtually the same time as the Serampur mission. And so it was the more British civil servants who nurtured the DNA of India.
Okay.
And they were the ones who finally wrote what is known as the India Act of 1935, which is the foundation of our Constitution, which was approved in 1950. So it was written by the British civil servants in
Okay.
1935.
And so, is this the root of the objection that Hindu nationalists would have in that they recognize India as a Christian construct?
Yes, there was a bill which the ruling party wrote 2 years ago to change the name of India to Bharat. But the problem was that that had already been debated in the Constituent Assembly during 1948-49, and the Constituent Assembly had rule that out, because Bharat comes really after India. So only in 1904, someone who was designated as a terrorist, Veer Savarkar, he created secret society in which he, for the first time, he used the name Bharat for India. And then 1951, his ideas of political Hinduism gave birth to Bharatiya Jan Sangh, which was a political party. So the name Bharat and Bharatiya, which is what Hindus want to propose, they are both came after the names India.
India. And could you spell Bharat?
Bharat, Bharat. Bharat.
Bharat.
There was a king called Bharat, but there was never a kingdom called Bharat.
Okay. All right. So when you argue that that the Bible was a shaping force for modern India, let's talk a little bit about nations and nation states. All right. What distinction would you make between a nation and a nation state?
It's the concept of sovereign nation state is a Jewish idea. In Genesis 10 and 11, particularly 11, all the people living in Babel, are one people, descendants of Noah, speaking one language. They, through the confusion of languages, they had divided into nations, which is really people group.
Right.
So each people group, tribe, ruling themselves in their own territory, in their own language. So the concept of self-government and territory and language are important. But the most important point for me is that what divided people into nation was not ethnicity. So the American missiology, which reads too much into ethnos, that nation means people group. No, it was one people group, all descendants of Noah, divided according to languages, linguistic groups. Now, Greeks never had a concept of nation. So Greeks were tribes, people groups. Alexander the Great organized them into an empire. It's the only political institution that Greece ever exported was imperialism. It came as a reaction to Persian imperialism, but Plato, Aristotle, the greatest of Greek philosophers, had condemned the idea of democracy, and they had advocated this philosopher king, which is what Alexander was trained to be by Aristotle. So Europe accepted the imperialism. Rome took over after Greece, but then everyone in Europe, Russia and Sweden and England and France and Portuguese and Spanish, Germans, Austro-Hungarians, everybody wanted to be an empire. So the concept of nation came to Europe during the 30-Year War. And it was only in the Peace of Westphalia in 1648 that Holland, Netherlands, and Switzerland were recognized for the first time as sovereign nation states. So the idea of nation is a Jewish Protestant idea. It was not an Orthodox idea. It was not a Roman Catholic idea. Roman Catholic idea would have been actually globalist, Christendom, which they identified as with Roman Empire. But Protestant, when they returned to the Jewish Bible as God's word, they said, no, empire is a diabolical idea. It is actually Luciferian idea. So Lucifer in Isaiah 14 is Babylon. Because empire is a diabolical principle of warfare. You don't respect your neighbor's territory. You want to take your neighbor's territory. That's imperialism. So imperialism means wars. But nation was God's idea of peace, that you love your land, you fight for your land, you build your land, you die for your land, but you don't covet your neighbor's property.
Right.
So, nation was God's idea, prescription for peace. And this spread. So, Netherlands and Switzerland were the first European nations as a result of the Protestant Reformation returning to the Bible. The USA was the third nation, inspired by two of them. So, USA was 13 colonies fighting against British imperialism. They could have become 13 kingdoms.
Yeah.
They could have become an empire, which some would like today to take
Yeah.
over Canada and Mexico.
Yeah.
But America chose to be a nation, not an empire. A few times it has behaved imperialistically in Philippines, etc. But it was because of America that ultimately imperialism came to an end. So Franklin Roosevelt, imposed upon Winston Churchill, who was quite an imperialistic prime minister, to put an end to empires, because Roosevelt's point was that you guys, British, are fighting against Germans. Germany has corrupted nationalism. So what was called German nationalism was actually German imperialism, extending its territory through warfare. But Roosevelt's point was that what's the difference between Hitler and you? He has started taking over neighboring countries now. You've been ruling 2/3 of the world, 1/3 of the world for 100 years. So what happens if we help you beat Germany and Japan? Will you then colonize Germany? Will you then colonize Japan? If you do, you will become the big problem, because we can't trade anywhere except through your permission.
Okay.
So the end of World War II must mean end of imperialism.
And the Bretton Woods Agreement. And
well, I have in my new book, I have quotation. Roosevelt's son, he was present in 9 of the 11 meetings that happened between Roosevelt and Churchill, and he records the conversation of how Roosevelt was representing a much weaker country, USA at that point. Churchill was the world leader, war hero. But trump cards were with the USA, and Hitler knew, Churchill knew that British Empire is lost without America.
right.
So trump cards were with Roosevelt, and he played them well. He forced Churchill to give independence to India and end colonialism. So Spanish and Portuguese empires had been ended by Napoleon and Simon Bolivar in Latin America and all that happened in Latin America. But British Empire was flourishing. Dutch was flourishing, although Dutch itself had been colonized by Hitler. Germany was becoming the most dreadful empire, which is what imperialism is what ended.
So let's go back to, I was fascinated by what you said about Netherlands and Switzerland. If I understand, you're saying they were the first two nations in the modern sense.
Yes.
And America was the third?
Yes.
Okay. Defining a nation is squirrelier than defining a triangle. So a triangle is a triangle is a triangle. But if you look at something like Switzerland, they've got 3 main religious, Lutheran, Reformed, and Catholic. They've got 4 languages, Italian, French, German, and Romance. And they've got the mountains that geography holds them in common, but the French have Alps too, and the Germans have Alps too, and Italy has Alps. So why are the Swiss the Swiss?
A Swiss confederacy had existed for 300-400 years before 1648.
Okay.
But Switzerland was part of Spanish Empire. But because of geography, they were able to remain neutral when Protestants and Catholics are fighting, because some of the cantons are Protestants, some
Yeah.
are Catholics. They were able to stay neutral. So the real fight for national sovereignty, which fight went on for 80 years, that was the Dutch fight. What is
Mm.
now Netherlands was at that point 17 provinces, which merged with the Treaty of Utrecht, became 8. And they were fighting as they're reading. They all have different dialects, but they're reading one Dutch Bible.
Mm-hmm.
We are one people living in, speaking one language in one territory. Why are we being governed by France? Was the issue, which began 50 years of war. Then the last 30 years was the 30-year War from 1618 to 1648. When the Peace of Westphalia was which is northwestern Germany, when those conferences were happening, the mayor of Basel, a Protestant, he was sent to argue the case that Switzerland should be recognized as a sovereign nation. So, Switzerland became independent sovereign nation on the back of the Dutch
Okay.
war. But the idea of how can these 4 languages in geographically and religiously divided provinces, how could they become one nation? The answer is that that's exactly the Israeli model. So I make a distinction.
The Israeli model?
Israel was not one people group.
Mm-hmm.
Israel was 13 tribes because Joseph had become 2 tribes.
Yeah.
13 different tribes living together. They had 13 different, 12 provinces because Levites were distributed everywhere. So 13 tribes living in 12 provinces, being one nation, united by one law, one religion, one served by one priestly class. So a distinction between nation and great nation is very important, because President Trump uses the phrase great nation, but nobody defines what's the difference between a nation and a great nation.
Yeah.
So Israel from day one was a great nation, which means many people groups, united by a common law, common God, common governance. When they split between Israel, the 10 northern tribes, and Judah, the 2 southern tribes, it's 2 nations because there are 2 territories and 2 governing structures. So this is where the Fuller Seminary and the U.S. Center for World Mission has confused American missiology, that Israel, a nation means a people group. Yes, there are people groups, which is Genesis 11, but Israel is a model of a great nation where many people groups speaking different languages, because initially they are speaking both Egyptian and developing Hebrew, but then they are speaking Aramaic and other Greek.
So then, if I'm following you here, a small independent tribe like the Navajo would be a people group, an ethnic group, a nation.
If it is governing itself.
If it's governing itself.
Without governance, it's not a
right. If they're before anybody got to where the Navajo, they're making their own, following their own customs and laws. They're a nation. And you're saying if there are multiple people groups involved, but there's a principle of coherence or unity in the law and ultimately worship and faith, then it's a great nation.
Yes.
Which you're not, just because it's a great nation doesn't make it an empire.
No.
An empire is where you're assimilating people, conquest.
Yes.
So basically, if you say, "Oh, I like your oil fields," or I like your gold mines, and you go take them, and then it's the empire might result in 200 years from now that being a people group within a nation, but initially it's an empire and
Yes.
wrong and grasping.
So Paul defines what God means by nations from Genesis 11, or actually 10, all the way to Joshua, as a people, which could be several people groups, governing themselves in their own territory under a just law. So says what God had said 400 years earlier to Abraham, that Abraham will become a great nation because he will instruct, he will teach his children and his household, his ethne and non-ethne, to walk in my ways, to do what is just, what is right. So Moses repeats that in Deuteronomy 4. Now, I have given you all of these laws, decrees, edicts, ordinances. If you follow them, you will be a wise people, and others will say, what a great nation you are. So a nation is greater, closer it is to God's justice and law.
Mm-hmm.
And farther away it moves from God's justice, God's law, then it tends to
Tyranny or anarchy.
and totalitarianism and expansionism, that we'll take
Okay.
your territory.
So, in terms of the definitions we're working with, we have nation, people group nation, multiple people groups in a great nation, and empires, which are grasping and conquering. How, in definitionally, how would you fit Jews into it? What are the
Jews
Jews?
were from the time of Joshua, once they come into the Canaan, promised land, they are being forged to become a great nation
Mm-hmm.
as long as they obey God's law and are bound together. So that's the Levites become the religious worldview glue. They're divided amongst the 12 tribes, and they are coming to the temple in Jerusalem
Mm-hmm.
to learn God's law. And so the temple is the center of, it's the intellectual capital, it's the University of Israel. That's why Jesus takes his questions to the temple. And from there, the Levites return, the priests return, and they are settling issues in villages, towns. When there is a complicated case, they bring it back to Jerusalem. What does God's law mean here in this case? So the whole nation is being bound together by one revelation of what is right, what is just,
Okay.
what is righteousness.
So, what about from the Jews from the destruction of the temple down to the rise of Zionism in the late 1800s? The Jews during that period of time were not operating under God's economy. The temple sacrifices were no more, but everybody still knew what a Jew was, right? And today we've got secular atheist Jews in Brooklyn, and we've got Hasidic Jews, the black hat Jews, and we've got observant Jews, and we've got nominal, but everybody seems to know what a Jew is. How do they fit? Are they a people group? Are they an ethne? Or what? What are they? And I'm leaving Israel out.
Yes.
Yeah, Israel is a nation now,
Yes.
but
Well, what God was, it seems to me, what God was doing in Jewish history was similar to what he did with Christian history. As persecution in Jerusalem comes, Christians are dispersed all over the world to take the gospel with them.
yes,
Because Israel was, from the beginning, Abraham was chosen to bless all the nations.
mm-hmm.
So it is as Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Nehemiah, Esther, as they've gone into Babylonian, Persian Empire, they are taking the truth of who God is, what truth is, to these nations. They come all the way to India, and which is what makes it possible for Apostle Thomas to come to India, because there is already a Jewish
Presence there.
community there. So when Cyrus, for example, or Nebuchadnezzar, when he sees the power of God with these three men thrown
Hmm.
into the fiery furnace, or Daniel thrown into the lion's den, then they issue decree that God is the true God,
Hmm.
and no one must speak against him. Everyone must believe, bow
Okay.
before him, etc. So the light is being spread, particularly with Esther's time and Mordecai, through. So dispersion of the Jews is part of the fulfillment of the original purpose that Abraham will be a light to the nations.
Because they bring the scriptures with them, the
They
Old
bring,
Testament,
yeah.
and yeah.
So the wise men, the Christmas time, who are coming to Jerusalem, where is the King of the Jews born? We have seen his star. So they probably have the Pentateuch with them. They have the
Hmm.
writings of Daniel with them. That it's during the beastly fourth empire of Rome, which is not named in Daniel. The King of Heaven is going to raise up a kingdom which will never end. The stone, which is uncut by human hand, demolishing these world empires to become a everlasting kingdom. So the wise men, they are uh, studying the light which has come to their part of the world, most likely through Daniel's writings and Daniel's collection, because Daniel is reading Jeremiah
Okay.
and he believes Jeremiah to be God's word.
So let's circle back around to India. So let's say everything goes swimmingly, and people decide to follow your definitions and advice and counsel. Uh, if uh, if India comes together as a nation, it would be a great nation, according to your
Yes,
definition, because there's many
too
different
many, yeah,
many different people groups and that sort of thing.
languages.
But the only way groups that disparate could be held together would be something like the Bible.
One worldview, one truth. So that is the third education revolution.
Okay,
That
you have a
every
book on that.
we have a book and a whole global movement which has emerged, and I'm hoping that with your support, what you're doing in Moscow will become a national movement.
Okay.
Every church in America can make use of the next 4 years of becoming a center of education.
Mm-hmm.
So the greatest damage that American theology and American church has done is abandoning education. So
Yes.
it was the Protestant movement that began educating the U.S. 13
Mm-hmm.
colonies in USA, and after 1850s,
Mm-hmm.
beginning with Horace Mann and culminating with Dewey in Chicago, American church abandoned education,
Mm-hmm.
handed it over to the state.
Yes.
But now, a very simple solution is, and I'll present it tomorrow at
Just be
New
taught. Yeah.
St. Andrews College, that we need to create an online encyclopedia come university. With this encyclopedia, we will compete with Wikipedia by giving away kindergarten to 12th grade curriculum for free to everyone, rich and
Mm-hmm.
poor. So every church, and this curriculum will be using technology. So if students are studying Einstein's theory of relativity, Einstein himself is coming through animation to teach his theory, and Newton is coming, and Shakespeare is coming to teach his own plays. So
Mm-hmm.
students are in the Globe Theatre in London watching a performance and listening to Shakespeare. What is this play all about? So we create using technology, we create a curriculum which we give away for free. This is what Gary North was arguing at the end of
Mm-hmm.
his life. But others had argued that YWAM, Lauren Cunningham, and Howard Mumstead, who started the University of the Nations, their original idea was to create a high school curriculum. So there are 4 million homeschooling children in USA and Canada. If we give them all a world's best curriculum for free, we have our encyclopedia to which people are returning every day, 4 or 5 times a day. To the parents who are homeschooling, we offer a graduate degree, a BA or an MA, in education and applied theology, because these parents are playing a pastoral role in shaping their children. And we can give a BA degree or MA degree for $1,000 a year. I don't know what the prices in college here are, but if you were giving to all the homeschooling parents offering a BA or MA for $1,000, 1,000,000 parents taking that is $1 billion. That allows us to create all kinds of curriculum, including a college level. College level curriculum will be sold, but this will be part of the encyclopedia. So all the details are on the encyclopedia. But if you're using artificial intelligence to create a personalized, tailor-made curriculum, a BA in nation building. So we're talking about making America great again, but no one is defining or explaining what exactly it means to be a great nation, how to be a great nation. These are phrases from the Bible. Abraham will be a great nation. Moses is saying that you will be a great nation if you do this, that, and the other. So we need a BA in nation building, and we're ready to start creating it. So this is a movement. The Indian church is ready. Brazilian church is ready. In Uganda, the government itself is ready to establish this, because most of these countries want to understand, how do you become a great nation?
So I've said for many years that all of our culture wars here in the United States are essentially battles over editorial control of the dictionary. And you're expanding that editorial control of the encyclopedia, editorial control of the educational system, because he who defines wins.
Exactly.
Right. And I think you put your finger on the sore spot where American evangelicals, under the influence of radical two kingdoms theology or a certain kind of dispensational theology, have just sort of checked out of the world of education and dictionary making and defining, and they've allowed the world to define all the terms, and then they didn't wake up until the world finally got to redefining boy and girl. and everybody said, wait, what are you doing?
Well, I'll talk about that this evening in the lecture. But Francis Bacon, the father of modern science, he was the first one who argued for an encyclopedia. And John Amos Comenius, who's called the father of modern education, he called it Pan-Sophia, love of all wisdom, that we need to create a knowledge bank where all the knowledge is gathered. But because Comenius was writing during the 30-Year War, the European church was not able to implement his vision, because both the Roman Catholics and the Protestants were divided, were weakened by the 30 years of war, and there were too many other priorities. So the encyclopedia project was taken over by French Enlightenment, and encyclopedia has remained an humanist project. But America's decline, you're rightly blaming dispensational theology, etc. But reform seminaries are as much a problem from my perspective. The seminary movement itself is a reactionary movement. The American church abandoning universities retreating into the seminaries
Mhm.
is anti-intellectualism. So when Harvard was lost in 1805, it became Unitarian.
Mhm.
The Trinitarian theologians left Harvard, created Andover seminaries, merged into Yale, and it was called Andover. Out of that came Berkeley University. So by 1810, you still had visionary leaders in America who were saying, okay, we've lost Harvard, we will build an alternative to Harvard. We'll build.
Mhm.
So UC Berkeley, Henry Durant, who built it, its motto still is, let there be light.
Yeah.
And Berkeley UC has 22 Nobel Prize winners. But after that, American spirituality, theology, seminaries declined to a point that put theology into an academic silo.
Yes.
So, what the seminary movement did was the queen of all sciences, the sun, which helped you see all of life, was put into a silo. It doesn't matter whether this is a reformed silo or dispensational silo.
Yeah.
Once theology has been confined to an academic silo, then the university becomes source of darkness.
Mhm.
And all of the university movements in America are basically defeated movements. InterVarsity, Campus Crusade, Navigators, you name it. They're saying we have lost these universities, Harvard, Princeton, Yale. Let's go and save souls.
Okay.
Let's go and establish prayer cells, Bible study cells, because we can't win the university back. So the seminary movement.
It's a man the lifeboats.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that was D.L. Moody's idea. So post Moody, American Christianity is a defeated religion.
Mhm.
Billy Graham won tons of souls and lost the nation.
Mhm.
Should the nations be discipled?
Yeah.
That's the big issue. American church has the capacity to do that. It does not have the theology or the vision to disciple the nation.
Yeah.
That's what is affecting our nations such as India.
And that American error has global ramifications. Yes.
Yes, that to disciple nation means reach unreached people groups.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
That it doesn't mean to disciple the nation, because the nation itself is misdefined.
So let me ask a practical question. When you're building this Christian encyclopedia or Christian bank of knowledge, that sort of thing, the editorial control of is it open source? Is there an editorial board? How do you basically a lot of jaded dispensationalists would say you can't, whatever you do, it's going to go liberal.
That is the
Right.
defeated. That is America's defeated Christianity.
Right.
That we can't possibly fight, because the issue here is really epistemology. How do we know truth?
Right.
But rationalism and empiricism have given up truth.
Do you have structural firewalls to keep that from happening, or is it simply the declaration of the truth that is going to?
No. Editorial control will have to be with proper scholars who are committed
Believers
to the Bible. That's the good thing about some of the seminaries, that they do have scholars who really believe the Bible to be God's word, and also academic institutions. So several Christian universities still have. So America, in the Christian evangelical America, there is intellectual capital, and there is no reason that America cannot be reformed, that America cannot be discipled. The talent and ability exists, but through the whole history of the last 200 years, American Christianity is a defeated religion, but it doesn't mean that it needs to remain defeated. So many of these people have actually believed that things will go from bad to worse.
American Christians are in the wine vat threshing out their grain.
But God says to Gideon, go in your strength and you will win.
Mm-hmm. And some of the political upheaval of the last 10 years indicates that things can actually change. Things can actually, people are not blocks of granite or blocks of wood. Decisive leadership and firm belief in the authority of God's word and bold proclamation can move a lot.
That's absolutely true. And one of the beautiful things happening in America is serious prayer. There are many people who are really praying for the USA and working hard, which is reflected in the recent election and some of the trends. So I think potentially next 4 years could actually be a season starting for truth to win the USA back. But president cannot do it.
Right.
Congress cannot do it. It has to be done by the church. The church is commissioned to disciple the nation. And if the church says, no, 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 let the White House do it, or let the second coming do it, we are not going to do it.
Or if the church says, oh, that's wonderful, we can go back to sleep now. No.
But I think there is a whole new awakening. There are many very good voices, and an encyclopedia can bring them together. And every home and every school, the poor people, refugees, getting a free world's best curriculum for free, K through 12. In several of my books and studies, how were honest, prosperous, powerful nations created? What Martin Luther does in writing the short catechism and the long catechism, the big catechism, every child in German Lutheran countries have to memorize the catechism. In Holland, everyone has to memorize the Heidelberg Catechism. So until 50 years ago, you can't graduate from high school unless you have memorized Heidelberg Catechism, which is a Reformed catechism. That is shaping the soul of a nation, that everyone is sharing a worldview. So this proposal to have the world's best curriculum available to everyone, whether home school or church school or state school, being available, is to shape the soul. What unites the nation is certain ideas. And if this is global movement, then you have the filling the earth with the knowledge of God as the waters cover the sea. But it's not just high school curriculum. The people who are become used to using your website, your encyclopedia, they then, whatever questions come up, like our encyclopedia should broadcast once a week the latest astrophysics, what have we learned from James Webb telescope or Hubble or other telescopes being interpreted. Every day you have lots of interpretations coming. But if there is one selected by experts that this is what we are learning, lectures going to everybody from our encyclopedia. That's the vision, that you are filling the earth with the knowledge of God, which is not just Bible exposition, but you are studying the heavens as well. The word from heaven, but looking into the heavens. And today I was listening to a Hindi YouTube where a Hindu is summarizing some of the latest scientific research on how did water come in on this planet. And he is arguing that the latest conclusions are that earlier they had been saying that these asteroids and others brought water here after the moon was created, a moon split. But now the consensus is emerging is that the Earth had water from the beginning.
Hmm.
And
And darkness was over the face
moon
of,
came
and
later
darkness
on
was
the,
over the face of the deep.
yes. So this was very interesting that he's not doing this on the basis of the Bible at all. This was a Hindu reflecting on the latest scientific discussion on the subject, that moon came later, Earth already had water.
One last question, slight topic change, but someone from India who's thinking in terms of Christian nationalism in your setting, there's no reason, going back to what you said earlier, there's no reason for a Christian nationalist in one country to be threatened by a Christian nationalist in another country. The problem would be Christian imperialism,
Yes.
right? Or imperialism in the name of Christ, rather than a Christian nationalism that says, I love my mother, and that means I understand why you love your mother.
Yes.
We don't have to be at
Yes.
odds.
India never had a concept of nation or the value called nationalism. So nationalism, the value, virtue of loving your own land, this came as a result of Indians studying English poetry. The father of Indian nationalism is Michael Madhusudan Dutt, a high caste Hindu convert to Christ, who began to write poetry about nationalism. And this poetry was inspired by Psalms like Psalm 102, where the dust of the stones of Jerusalem are dear to us. The dust is precious to us. Psalm 137, that they ask us to, our captors ask us to sing songs of Zion. How can we sing songs of Zion while in a foreign land? So we hung our harps and poplars.
Yeah.
We can't. So the nationalism is a Jewish virtue. You see that in Daniel, that he is willing to go into the lion's den, but looking towards Jerusalem, praying, repenting for the sins of Jerusalem, praying for forgiveness. Nehemiah, who has a secure job in the empire, most trusted servant, giving up, risking his life to go and rebuild his nation. So the biblical idea of nationalism inspired the English poets, Wordsworth, Longfellow, etc. They inspired Indian poets who began to write nationalist poetry. Out of that came Indian nationalism, which everybody understood that this came from Indians reading English poetry and reading the Bible. So what is called Christian nationalism is really a Jewish Protestant value.
Okay.
It's not Christian in the sense that it was not there in the Orthodox Christianity, it was not there in the Roman Catholic Christianity. It's a peculiar
Protestant thing.
Jewish Protestant thing which came to India and inspired Indian nationalism, the concept of nation. So I have a detailed discussion of how Indian nationalism developed and how it was corrupted by fascist nationalism. So what in Italy, the fascism, and in German Nazism, what they began to call German nationalism was hijacking a Protestant idea. And really, by German nationalism, they meant German imperialism. Let's take Poland and Holland and Czechoslovakia and England and France and Russia. So this was German imperialism. But by that time, seminaries in America had killed the Christian minds to a point that great people like Dr. Donald McGovern and Ralph Winter and missiologists, they got ashamed of the word nation. That the Bible doesn't mean nation or great nation. The Bible means people groups, the word nation. And they misread in the Greek word ethne or ethnos that because in Matthew 28, Jesus says, go into all the world, disciple all nations, he uses the word ethnos. He means people groups. Etymologically, they are correct that Greek language did not have a word for nation. It's a Jewish idea. So when you're translating the Bible, you're translating the Bible into Arabic or Urdu or Pashto, and you choose to use the word Allah for God. Because Urdu Bible or Arabic Bible has used the word Allah, does it mean that the translator means the supreme being whose prophet is Muhammad, who has no son?
Right. No.
No. So you're using a Greek word, but you're putting Hebrew theology into it. And what American missiologists have confused the whole world, and Lausanne movement has been guilty of this, they've confused the whole world by not realizing that, yes, Greek Bible is using the word ethne and ethnos, but it has to put the Jewish theology into it, the go and disciple nations,
nationhood.
make nations great again. President Trump understands the meaning of the word nation much better than American missiologists do.
And that's a wonderful note to end on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. This is a great honor.
Yes, this is wonderful. Thank you.